Okay, great. So welcome everybody, good evening. Very nice to be with you tonight. And so the class is called Who Owns the World? Cooperative Alternatives to Surveillance Capitalism. And we have a website for the course, which I will show you. And I also want to welcome the viewers online. So this course is live streamed, and there are a few hundred people watching this online as well. So as I mentioned, we will, every week we will have a talk like that. So it's about like an hour long. And then we switch the camera off, and then we can have a conversation here that's not recorded. So the course is coming out of a conference titled Who Owns the World that I convened in November here at the New School. We had some 160 speakers from 30 countries coming here showing their work with platform cooperatives. So I will show you in a minute what that means. And so here's the website. You can also follow that if you like. So every week, with two exceptions, we will convene here, start with a lecture, followed by informal discussions. So today we will do things in a slightly unconventional manner, like for the beginning of a course. We will introduce each other after the talk, right? And so for all questions, please leave those to the end. So this is my 10th year at the New School, and in the daytime, I researched the way people work online, and in the evenings, I often work in cooperatives, like the Park Slope Food Cooperative and others. And in 2008, I started to work on digital labor, and a few months later, in 2009, then convened the first large conference here on digital labor. We looked particularly at Facebook and how that could be considered labor, data labor in that sense. And later on, we switched to more compensated work, did one of these conferences in Hong Kong in 2018, where cooperatives and researchers came from all over Southeast Asia to take part in this event. And in 2015 was probably the key event where we introduced this idea of platform cooperativism here at the New School, which then from then on became viral and is now really practiced around the world, as you will learn in a few minutes. So I wrote 3 books on these topics. The first one really on digital labor. The second one is more like an analysis of the digital economy. And then in the second part, proposing this idea of platform cooperatives. And the third one is Ours to Hack and to Own, which I co-edited with Nathan Schneider. And it's, if you like, a mixtape show of people, commenting on these issues, everything from privacy to ownership to all kinds of various issues, some 45 authors in total. We have a website for this course. I mentioned it. It's if you go to whoownstheworld.org, you can follow it. This is also where the live stream is available, and the readings can be downloaded, and you can find out things about the speakers. You will need the syllabus, however, because there are some things that, of course, are not relevant to the public, so they are just for you, and you will find them in the syllabus. So today, I will kick off the series. And in the future, we hope to also live tweet these lectures so that one of you volunteers, perhaps each week, to actually take this on and tweet quotes, etc. So let me just quickly run you through the semester. I will start out by talking about platform capitalism and the challenges that workers are facing, as well as responses and strategies, especially platform co-ops, as this class is focusing on that, which are really like this will be the central focus throughout the semester. On January 29th, today, this will be me focusing on this lecture, Converting Care.com into a Cooperative. And next week, we will have Stephen Greenhouse, who will introduce his book, Beaten Down and Worked Up. I don't know if you followed Stephen Greenhouse. He's for 40 years a key labor journalist of the New York Times. And he will be in conversation with Wilma Liebman, who was Obama's chair of the National Labor Relations Board. So Stephen will present first, and then the two of them will be in conversation, mostly really about a history of unions in this country, like as a central force, certainly historically, in establishing worker power, right? And then the question is like how all of that translates into the digital and the platform economy, right? This will be part of next week's discussion. Then this will be followed by Lizzie O'Shea, who will be here, joining us from Australia. She will be here in New York, but coming from Australia, really just here for a day or two. And she is a lawyer and digital rights activist and author, and she just published this book with Verso. And she will focus on this quite recent wave, which you may have followed in The Atlantic and many other outlets, on tech worker activism, right? So people, employees at Google or Apple or other companies really pushing back against some of the projects that Google was working on, for example, collaborations with oppressive governments, and also misogyny within those companies. So that's a really promising and new area. On February 12th, we will talk with Alana Irvin, and she is the co-founder of Inspiral. Has any of you heard of Inspiral here in the room? It's a really fantastic collective in New Zealand, so which practices cooperative principles, but they are designers and developers and have developed this network that is really quite distinct from much what we see here. So we will talk with her about how in an organization that refuses this sort of top-down hierarchy, you can still have good leadership, right? Many cooperatives have this one worker, one vote principle, so there isn't really the traditional boss, right? But that doesn't mean that leadership doesn't have to happen. So how can you create a bossless organization? And this is what she has focused on for many years, and I think she will be fantastic. Then the week after, we have another fantastic guest. We will have the CEO of the American co-op movement, Doug O'Brien, and he will unsurprisingly tell us about the co-ops that surround us, which is really kind of fascinating because 1 in 3 Americans is in a cooperative, which is really not something people would intuit necessarily. There are, like really large-scale cooperatives. Over 70% of the country are electrified through rural electric cooperatives, which will be another focus later on in the semester. There are gigantic cooperatives like REI or Ace Hardware, Ocean Spray, Cabbage Cheese. These things you probably come across them every day, but you don't think of them as cooperatives, and there's a reason for that, and we will talk about that. So they are hidden in plain sight, essentially, right? So Doug O'Brien will talk about also the history of the cooperative movements. And I asked him to bring some of these cooperatives with him. Let's see if it works out. Maybe we'll have Ocean Spray in town, I don't know, Cabbage Cheese. And the week after, we will have a stream talk from Germany, from Berlin, which really looks at policy responses. So as I will tell you in a little bit, we have been working with Senator Gillibrand. I worked with the Social Democrats in Germany. We worked with the Labour Party in the UK. So Jonas Pensian, who is a research fellow at our institute here for the Cooperative Digital Economy, wrote a research paper on policy responses in these various countries from Germany, France, and the United States. So how do policymakers respond to platform cooperatives. I was just in South India where the government sat me down and said, like, so what do we need to change to make platform co-ops happen? And so that's sort of this question that Jonas is asking of these countries that he's researching. The week after, on March 4th, there will be 2 speakers. That will be one remote and one in person. So we have one of the key experts on blockchain here at the New School. It's a Turkish guest professor, Koray Kadiskan, and he's really amazing in explaining blockchain. I don't know, most of you came across the term. I don't know, it took me certainly, I don't know, many hours to be able to explain this to my grandmother. I mean, it's like very, right? Like, hello. And he's just extremely good at this and sort of disentangling this confusion. And he will make his own intervention there by introducing a taxonomy of different blockchains, thinking about cryptocurrencies on the blockchain, etc. He's coming out with a book from Princeton University Press on blockchain, which will probably be, I would assume, one of the best books in that field. And then from Amsterdam, we will hear from Morshed Manan, who will report on so what we call protocolary co-ops, or the language hasn't really settled yet so much, protocolary co-ops, data co-ops, you name it. So essentially cooperatives that run on the blockchain, right? And so he has researched several in our ecosystem, from eva.coop, which I will talk about a bit more in a little bit, to other ones. So how do you run a business on a protocol, and how do you do this in a transparent way that is based on solidarity and the cooperative principles, right? So that will be his contribution. Then, of course, we have to have some workers here as well, right? So Up and Go is a cleaning collective, platform co-op here in New York City. And the co-founders that are in this anchor institution that facilitated this platform co-op will be here talking about Up and Go, and hopefully also with a group of workers. It's always a bit hard because, of course, they have to be paid when they're here. And then they speak also only Spanish, so we have to have a translator as well. But maybe we can pull this off. This will happen right after the blockchain event on March 25th. We will have a film screening. So I rented this French documentary about the Park Slope Food Co-op, which I was actually there when they filmed it. So, of course, it's in English, but it's a documentary. And then I also trying to organize a field trip for us to actually go to the last fortress of Stalinism in the United States, the Park Slope Food Co-op, and learn a bit more, right, about how they functioned with 17,000 members, and how they upheld or did not uphold, right, these principles that they started with in the 70s of social justice and beyond just consumer cooperatives, right? I think that will be really fun. Then the week after that, on April 8th, I will take you on a world tour. And that will start here in New York City. Then we will fly to Victoria, Canada, from there to Zurich, Switzerland, from there to Bologna, Barcelona, Vienna, Manchester, Preston, and then the big leap to Bendigo, Australia, and from there to Indonesia, on to Hong Kong, South Korea, and Japan, and Tokyo, and then from there to the south of India, Trivandrum and Kochi, both in Kerala, India, and from there to Cape Town, South Africa, all sort of giving you a tour of platform cooperatives in all of these countries and what they look like and how they differ. We will then go on to Nairobi and then back to the US via Sao Paulo and Toronto, and then come back to New York City. So it will be a world tour where you basically get to see like all these large, this whole variety of projects in this ecosystem with all these sort of like fascinating local politics and responses to that. And I think you will enjoy that very much. Then the next week, on April 22nd already, we have probably the key expert, or certainly one of the key experts on rural electric cooperatives in this country. from UC Davis. And I don't know if you ever dream about rural electric cooperatives. It's like, sounds extremely exciting, doesn't it? But it is actually really quite exciting because it shows you the power of cooperatives, which is, in the 1930s, right, 90% of rural America was not properly electrified. Yeah? And then with some help from policymakers, cooperatives really took that on because the utilities, regular utilities, just didn't find that profitable enough to bring electricity to every last village in Kansas, right? And this is really then where cooperatives came in and electrified most of the country. Right? So very, very significant. And also it shows you how cooperatives can very much scale as well. Up to this day, 42 million members, right, in the Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives. And I think $15 billion in profit every year. So definitely not a niche phenomenon. Then next we will have a good friend of mine, Nathan Schneider, with whom I organized here the conference in 2015. He is a journalist and an author and an assistant professor at the University of Colorado. And so he will be here to talk about this essentially one-way road that people describe when they think about startups, right? I don't know, do we have any startup entrepreneurs among you? People who tried or think about this? Yes, one, good. Two, good. Okay. And so, when you think about starting a project like that, literally everyone I talk to, there's just one option. The next thing you do is you find a venture capitalist, right? Somebody who gives you $800,000, $1 million, right? What does it do in New York City? I talk to people who've done that, who are successful with that. 18 months later, this venture capitalist turns around and says, well, where are my profits, right? So why aren't you making money? And if you don't, they literally take over your project, and it's really not your project anymore. So people get very frustrated and lose control. And so what Nathan and I are proposing, have been proposing for many years, is that no, there's also another way, which is that you can actually be financed through community crowd equity, right? So in the United Kingdom, the cooperative movement raised 112 million pounds just through the community, essentially people who like a project. And it's a bit different than crowdfunding, so there's really no expectation of a great return. People just support it, and this is how many of these projects start, right? The second way is, and this is why I invited Nathan, he had this, wrote a paper which I linked on the website as well, which is called Exit to Community, right? So you might be familiar, in Silicon Valley, most projects are really not so interested in creating businesses. They are really much more interested in exiting, right? So exiting meaning, becoming interesting enough to these big tech companies that they would acquire you, right? So to the Apples or Googles or Microsofts. So that's really the goal for most of these projects. But exiting could also mean that you convert your business to a cooperative, right? So as I coined this this talk, what would it be like if care.com, right, this central platform that for home care would be converted into a cooperative, right? In fact, Nathan, a few years ago, started a project, the Buy Twitter campaign, in which he tried to purchase Twitter, right, and turn it into a cooperative. So it was up for $12 billion, and so they did the math, and it was about $60 per user. Of course, the math doesn't work like that, because then you have shareholders who own, 5 shareholders who own almost everything, and then a few people who own, it's not a democracy. But as a public relations campaign, it was incredibly successful, and there were hundreds and hundreds of articles about it. What would it be like if Twitter would be a cooperative, right? Could we boot Trump off the boat? All of that. The last talk will most likely be by Ron Kim. Do you know our beloved Ron Kim? New York State Assembly member, really a fantastic person. You will love him, I think, when he comes. I really admire his work. So he has just proposed for New York City a public Venmo, a publicly owned Venmo, and is like fully in support of platform co-ops as well. And if we're really lucky, he brings Julia Salazar as well. Familiar with her? Have you heard of her? So that's quite likely that they come together. So this is our cast for the semester. How is it? Yes? Good. Okay. Approval. That's good. You have also a reference, a companion site to this course, if you like. So this isn't really like any other course, right? It's a bit different in the sense there's like a movement attached to this course. I know it's just a few people here in the audience with you, but there are lots and lots of people out in the world that support this and work on this and are interested in this. So we have a website for this, which you can use for your research, for your papers, for your questions, for your thinking about this. So you can also, maybe in difference to other classes, get attached actually like to this movement, right? So you can join this, and this is maybe also part of what we are trying to do here. So at the bottom of our website, platform.coop, you can go and sign up for a newsletter. It turns out to be an insanely long essay every 2 weeks now with huge numbers of links, references to papers, and you name it. And we have, of course, a Twitter account and a Facebook forum and a mailing list. So there are a few thousand people on the Facebook group as well. So you can join that as well, right? So that's just another way to engage. All right, so then let's get started.